Hi, it's Dennis Daly. Many years ago, I got an invitation from Westinghouse Broadcasting, Group W, to go to Stamford, Connecticut, and see the massive uplinking facility that Group W had that threw all kinds of programs up to the satellites so they could be received by stations and users in private homes. But before going to Stamford, I realized that just south of Washington, D.C., where I was living at the time, was quite an antenna farm. We are standing beside one of the off-ramps of Interstate 395, very near the beltway that encircles Washington, D.C. Technically, this is Alexandria, Virginia. More specifically, it's an area called Bryn Mawr. About 20 or so years ago, engineers realized that Bryn Mawr would be the perfect place to put satellite uplinking dishes. And so many of the programs you see that come out of the Washington, D.C. area, whether they be regularly scheduled programs such as Face the Nation on weekends, or special programs, one-shot reports from Washington, come out here to Bryn Mawr and go up to the satellite and back down, and eventually you get to see and hear them. Of course, satellite communications has revolutionized everything. I'm old enough to remember a time that when I was working in local radio, everything came through the phone company, whether it be the radio network or St. Louis Cardinal baseball or whatever. It all came through the phone company on special wires. And when things went wrong, you checked with the phone company. But now a lot of it goes up to satellites and back down. A little lesson in how satellites work first. For example, you're listening to a radio station right now. I don't need to tell you that. Whether it's AM or FM, it doesn't matter. The radio station sends out the signal from its antenna, and your radio picks it up. But this program is getting to you in a very roundabout way. It was sent originally, and of course you know that we're live on tape, from Washington, D.C., up to a satellite, and back down to the People's Radio Network in Florida. They are now sending it up to another satellite, which is receiving it, sending it back down to your radio station, which in return is receiving it and sending it out its transmitter into your radio. Complicated, right? But it happens instantaneously. What we're going to do is to go through one of the premier satellite uplinking centers and talk to a gentleman who's an expert on satellites to kind of clear up the mystery on how electronic communications work. If you're in broadcasting, you tend to notice things such as satellite farms or big fancy antennas, but if you're not, sometimes they're invisible. Even though in parts of the country there are tremendous numbers of those great big white dishes sending and receiving satellite signals. Recently we went to Stamford, Connecticut. That is the headquarters of Group W's Network Services Department. You may know the name Group W, Westinghouse, a venerable name in broadcasting, KDKA, the first regularly scheduled commercial station in the U.S., a Westinghouse station. The gentleman who runs the affair in Stamford, Connecticut is Alden Stalker. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Group W Network Services. He is one of the nation's foremost experts on satellite communications. When we visited his facility in Stamford, he took us around, but first we sat down and talked about the history of satellite communications and how it all started.
It's been around for quite some time, but it hasn't been... It's really been about 14 years now. 1979, 1980 was really the dawn, if you will, of the heavy commercialization of satellite communications for we call common carrier, non-telephone companies and non-government applications. I've been in the broadcasting business actually for 20-some years now, so I had the pleasure of being part of Westinghouse, who was a very technically conversant company, and it seemed appropriate to get into the satellite business at that point in time. In 1979, 1980, we installed C-band earth station facilities at all of the Group W TV stations.
Now, can I define that? Do I understand that when you say earth station, you mean a facility that's capable of sending the signal up to the satellite, or am I confusing the issue here? Does earth station mean receiving or transmit, or necessarily both?
It really means both. In fact, a parabolic antenna, the type that you'll see at large installations, but these days you see them on people's houses and you see them on local gas stations. Most of those antennas are actually fully capable of transmitting and receiving, and in the broadcast, both the radio and television business, a large percentage of those antennas do in fact transmit and receive.
For example, this would allow a small-town television station, let's say, I mentioned Indiana, Evansville, Indiana, if there's a natural disaster there, for example, that TV station might have the capability of sending the pictures back to a network, or CNN, for example, in a way that years ago would have maybe not even been possible or been an enormous expense.
Well, that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, I think a very high percentage of the network-affiliated TV stations in this country do have the ability to transmit material, commonly news, back to their networks.
Westinghouse Group W has a tremendous facility there, all kind of uplink dishes. They put together a lot of the cable programming you see, and we'll be talking more about that. The gentleman in charge is one of the nation's foremost experts on satellites, Alton Stalker. He's Senior Vice President there at Group W Network Services. We were talking about the way radio has been distributed over the years by the phone company, but he also reminded me that before satellites, that's the way television pictures got around.
Well, it was exactly the same way in the TV side of the business. Up until about 1981, 82, 83, depending on the network, all network distribution was done by coaxial cable running on the ground, typically out of New York City and going around the country. That was very costly, and it wasn't the most reliable service, and also had some technical disadvantages. So when the satellites were launched that had video capability, the networks, all one after another, started to make use of that capability. So now what happens is that the programming is delivered from wherever it has originated, still typically New York City, although much of it also comes out of Los Angeles, and then is delivered directly to the affiliate TV stations. And the big difference now between what it was then is that not only is the quality considerably better, and so is the reliability, but it gives the broadcast network the ability to easily sectionalize or regionalize their network. We do a great deal of business here at Group W Network Services for CBS. As a matter of fact, the majority of the CBS broadcast network product that you see in the U.S., we handle on their behalf. CBS has the ability to actually have 8 CBS networks. Now, obviously, some of those are related to time shifts for different regions of the country, but the majority of that is to allow for separate commercial content for different regions of the country. You know, the old story of selling snow tires in Minnesota and swimsuits in Florida is very accurate in this business.
Well, I was going to mention that. When I was in high school, I went to the AT&T switching center in Terre Haute, Indiana, and the television pictures had a tap-off point, if you will, there for the layman to go to the Indianapolis TV stations and that type of thing. But it was a football game in the fall, and there were 3 engineers with headsets on talking to New York because they actually had to switch the cable so that you would get a snow tire commercial for people in the southern half of the U.S., but a regular Goodyear tire commercial in the north. And all of this, which I guess is done by computer now, there were guys with big cords, 2 or 3 inches in diameter, and just swinging their arms around. And it was like just all holy heck broke loose when someone said, now. And,
right.
And it's hard to believe that that's really been that recently.
Well, it has been, and of course, I guess time goes by quickly, and it's really been upwards of 12, 14 years now. But you're right, miniaturization, and the big thing with the satellite systems is that the user, the programmer, in this case the network, has 100% control of their own distribution without the need for any third party in the middle.
Let's, if we can, for a person listening, before we talk about what all services you do here, try to explain how a satellite works. Let me start. The satellites that are commonly used in broadcasting are, from the perspective of Earth, basically sitting still. They're doing a little station keeping up there, I understand, making a little bow tie pattern to keep the inertia going in some instances. But they're sitting there. If you would, start, let's say, a CBS television program. We're here in Stamford, Connecticut. I'm not sure how many air miles that is from downtown New York. But take us from the master control room at CBS television, downtown New York City, through the process until it gets to a person watching at home on television, in very basic terms.
Very basic terms. Well, I think it started with a satellite. satellite is a common term, and really you can think of a satellite as nothing more than a big mirror in the sky. That's really all the satellite does, is takes a signal that is transmitted from an Earth station on the ground, bends it, if you will, reflects it, if you will, back down to a receiving antenna on the ground. But the major benefit of a satellite is that a satellite is distance insensitive. The footprint, as it's called, or the coverage, if it's called, from the satellite covers the entire continental U.S., almost always Hawaii and Alaska and the Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So essentially all of the U.S., continental U.S. and all the states are covered from that single satellite. So you can uplink from Connecticut here, where I have our facilities, and everybody in the U.S. can receive that signal as long as they've got an antenna looking at that particular satellite.
Programming, for example, from the major networks in New York City come out to Connecticut, where he then puts them up onto the satellites. And I mentioned the fact that his company had to make sure that it never shut down or had a power failure, because the networks have a lot riding on those programs on a minute-to-minute basis.
Oh, absolutely. And matter of fact, the broadcast networks, there's almost no excuse that is satisfactory for losing 10 seconds of Danny Rather's newscast. I mean, where when you and I were growing up, they would put up 1 moment, please, and you'd be there 10 minutes with nothing. Right. You don't find that anymore. That's not tolerated. So that programming comes out of the broadcast center. It then comes to Stamford as either by our proprietary fiber optic system or a microwave system we also have. So there's a diversity of routing. Again, so you've got a backup. Backup comes to Stamford, where it is then transmitted to one of two satellites. As an example, CBS uses the Hughes Galaxy 6 or Galaxy 7 and Galaxy 4 satellites. And then that signal then is, as I said, is reflected off that satellite, the transponder, if you will, and then it goes down to your local TV station where it's received. The signal then can either be recorded for later playback, which is frequently done for syndicated programs and daytime shows, or the newscasts are typically carried live. It goes right through the station, then to their transmitter, and then to the subscriber's home, either by the over-the-air antenna, or if you're in a cable system, it will come over cable. So there's many pieces to this distribution game. Well, now, why do not CBS, the other networks, who go to this extent to get their programs out here to you on very basic terms, why don't they do this themselves? What is there about your facility here that makes them so darn sure you're going to do it better than they can? Well, that's a real good question. And again, I think every one of the four networks do it a little differently. But we actually do work for all the networks here in one measure or another. But I think to answer your question, it's just almost all corporate America these days are doing what is called outsourcing. There are people who have specialties. And we have a specialty in certain areas. One of them is transmission services, which we are very good at. We've been talking about satellite communications, and we were beginning to go through his satellite uplinking center there in Stamford. He had told us about the programs they uplink, the evening news with Dan Rather, and a lot of other things, but I asked him about programs that aren't done on a regular basis, things that are only done occasionally by special order. Our most active product line is with sports. We do not compete strongly in the short segment news gathering materials. But if you're looking for a sports event, a concert, a special event, things of that nature, then we are very, very competitive, and we do a great deal of that kind of work. What about a company which wants to present a new line, or maybe just closed circuit to have the CEO talk to employees? That type of thing would come into play here? Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's what we call business television. And business television is one of our most rapidly growing product lines, where we have companies such as IBM, Carrier, Dow Jones, to name but a few, General Electric, who we provide complete business TV systems to those companies for exactly that purpose, so that not only can the chief executive officer easily address the employees of the company, both domestically and internationally, I might add. We're doing a lot of international work these days. But even these days, the majority of the traffic is becoming training. I've heard a new word here recently, and that's just-in-time training. And that's becoming very, very much part of the corporate environment, to be able to train employees just before they need to do whatever the task is.
Why is it dishes are getting smaller? I mean, the first downlink, the first receiving dish I ever saw was at a university, and the thing was as big as a house. And now you have this direct satellite TV where it looks like a pizza plate. What has made this possible?
Well, two things. Obviously, one is technology. I guess technology is the answer, but the original services were done what's called C-band technology, and that's a very robust service. In fact, it's the same set of frequencies that were used for many, many years with long-distance telephone calls. But that did require a certain size antenna. An antenna 30 feet in diameter was not unusual for this type of a service. And that's still the service that is principally used for cable distribution and broadcast distribution, where you can't stand rain attenuation or outages from atmospheric issues. But then what happened is that, of course, technology progressed, and we got to the point in the industry where equipment could be manufactured to work at a higher frequency band called the KU band. That is commonly the band that you see most of the antennas around on commercial properties. These antennas that are about 1 or 2 meters in diameter, 3 feet, 4 feet in diameter. Those are typically KU band antennas. When the frequency went up, so did the power capability of the satellites. So between the higher frequency and the higher power, it made for a smaller antenna size. And then most recently, again, technology continued to move forward, and now we're getting into the direct broadcast satellites, which are the ones that you're seeing, which are typically 60 centimeters or so, or perhaps just 18 inches in diameter, which are direct television, direct TV services is using. Again, higher frequency, but a much higher power satellite. And that's really all technology driven, getting those satellites in the sky, which are very large, very heavy, and very high powered. But that allows you to have the very small antenna, very inexpensive antenna on the ground. And that now is becoming a commercial product or consumer product.
What is it like for a person such as yourself who relies on these satellites? I presume it's safe to say there's only so much room around the equator to accommodate these. When you see a launch that doesn't work, a satellite that they have to destruct, it would seem that the capacity is, and I know they're combining channels, but are you reaching a point where if you could throw a couple more up in the air real quick, you'd like that concept?
Oh, yeah, as a matter of fact, in the U.S. right now, and to a lesser extent the rest of the world, but certainly in the U.S., we are in a very, very severe satellite transponder capacity crunch. There simply are not enough to go around with all the users. And that's two reasons have happened for that. One is that there have been, as you noted, several launch failures in the last 12 months. And the second reason is there's just a considerably greater demand for video.
Alden Stalker took us through a facility that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, hopefully without a glitch. You must have an enormous amount of electronic equipment to accommodate what you're doing, to provide, as you say, redundancy. But what about losing electricity? What about things like that? I presume you have backup generators, batteries. How does that work?
Well, we have all those. As a matter of fact, like I said before, this is we are very, very concerned about reliability here. So consequently, all of the basic building subsystems, the power systems, the air conditioning systems, the fire protection systems, all of these systems have to have the same level of reliability as the basic electronic equipment does. So we have everything is protected here. We have 1.2 million watts of generator capacity in the basement. We store sufficient fuel here to run the facility for 10 days straight. And like I say, in fact, our design philosophy for this facility is that no single failure is going to cause a disruption to our customer service. And we do take that very rigorously.
Now, you have two places from which you can uplink, I understand. You have what amounts to an antenna farm. There is one just south of me in Washington, D.C., the Washington Teleport, and it looks like something out of science fiction. I think most people on the receiving end probably have never seen as many of those big dishes lined up as you see in a place like this.
Well, there are actually several locations around the country, but you're right, they're not common. We do have two locations. The one we're in right now is basically our production and distribution center.
This says the Discovery Channel on the door.
This is the Discovery Channel. This is where the Discovery Channel originates from, and if many of your listeners may be familiar with the Discovery Channel, and most people are, it's perhaps the most successful channel in the U.S., certainly one of the fastest growing. We do all of the operations for the Discovery Channel. And what you're seeing now is the Discovery Channel Operations Center, where the Discovery Channel East Coast feed, and they have a companion West Coast feed, are originated from. Discovery Channel sends all their program tapes here and their commercials, and we have the responsibility to stitch all that material together into a seamless program that a viewer sees.
So you're acting not only as the uplink of their product, you're acting as the assembler of that product.
Absolutely. We are a multi-faceted operation here. We have program origination, we have production, as well as the satellite distribution. And each part is equally important because one can't exist without the other. But these are very sophisticated, high-end operations because, as I said before, reliability and quality are paramount. And this is television programming.
Now, what other cable channels are being put together here?
Well, we actually have 4 channels that are operational here. The Discovery is what you're looking at. We'll walk down the hall in a minute. We'll see the Arts Entertainment Network. We'll see the new History Channel. And you'll also see Viewer's Choice, which is a pay-per-view movie service. All of these services, those companies rely upon us to be their operations division for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I guess I just made the false assumption. I always assumed the Discovery Channel was based in the Washington, D.C. area because of the announcers I hear in common with local television. I just assumed that their studios were there.
Well, their studios are there and the administrative offices are there, but they...
But I mean, as far as the actual, you might say, of them playing disc jockey, as it were.
Well, but they just as the CBS network has done is to subcontract with us to handle their distribution. Discovery and these other cable networks that I spoke of contract with us to handle both their program origination and their distribution.
Well, now here's a sign that says ESPN.
Right.
That goes through here too?
Well, we were just walking through what is we call a special event area. It is a facility that actually has a capability of handling 9 simultaneous special events. The main user of this is NFL. Starting last season, you may have read, maybe you were a subscriber even, of the NFL Sunday Ticket project, where if you're a person who has a backyard antenna, or if you're watching DirecTV, you can watch every NFL game that is played on Sunday. Well, on a Sunday, there can be as many as 9 games starting simultaneously at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So this is a 9-channel facility that you're walking through, which specifically supports the NFL games on Sundays, and it supports ESPN collegiate games on Saturday. So it's a very, very busy place. Sports is a big part of our business, particularly on weekends.
It must take an enormous amount of coordination. Does a lot of it happen by automatic computer switching? You still have people here reading logs and checking off programs? How does it all work?
Well, it's actually a combination of the two. Our people are really the backbone of our operation. We have extremely skilled people, and then we support them very well with high levels of automation. But
this facility through the glass for us, it looks kind of like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise.
Well, it's that's kind of you to say that. But this happens to be the control area for the Arts Entertainment Network. And these are there's typically 2 operators here. All the tape machines in this case are behind the wall, as opposed to the Discovery Channel, a little different operation where the tape machines are in eye shot. But there is a very significant proprietary automation system that is used to allow all of the pieces that are part of a normal program to be put together in the fashion that people watch. I don't think many of your viewers probably don't realize, but when you're watching that half-an-hour show on Discovery, Arts Entertainment, or CBS, that's not a continuous show. There could easily be as many as 60 to 80 separate elements that go into that 30-minute show, primarily with commercials and station breaks and promotion material, plus the program itself. All that has to be done in a very seamless way so that the viewer doesn't perceive any break in the programming. And that's really what we do here. We are very good at doing those kinds of, we call it traffic work.
If you can capsulize it, what do you people do best here, or maybe uniquely, that's either not being done elsewhere or that you're really the most proud of?
Well, I think there's a couple things. From the standpoint of being most proud of, I think we are the most proud of the reputation that we have in the industry. Is we like to think that we are the best in the business as far as providing the very high levels of customer service, obviously reliability, providing the best technical quality of service that the equipment is capable of providing, and really handling a client's origination and transmission needs in the very best possible fashion, and at the same time try and do that in a very cost-effective way. So I think we've been very successful at that. So we are doing something right. But I think the other part of the question is that what we have striven for some time here is to put together a facility that is a comprehensive facility to support all the needs of the video user. This facility has everything from studio production to post-production, graphics capability, program origination, heavy trafficking functions, log generations. Of course, they have the Earth Station complex. We support the business television marketplace, as I mentioned earlier, in a significant way. And we're also becoming very international in scope. As a matter of fact, this facility that you have walked through here now, we are currently duplicating this facility in Singapore to serve the requirements of cable programmers in that region of the world. So our reputation, I think, is probably what we're most proud of, and that seems to be what people come and talk to us about.
Well, in the theater, if they want to wish a person good luck, they say break a leg. I guess the thing to say here is don't blow a fuse.
Good enough. We'll accept that.
Alden, thanks for showing us around. It's a great place here, and I hope for people who never stop to think that all of this doesn't just happen automatically, they realize now a lot of work goes into it.
Well, I think in most cases it's really the behind-the-scenes activity that makes or breaks whatever the task is, and we have some extremely competent engineering operations people here, and that really is what makes this place tick the way it does. But thank you for your compliment. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so a visit with Group W Westinghouse's uplinking facility at Stamford, Connecticut. Boy, will I remember the day I did that interview. I flew into New York City, rented a car, turned on the radio, and heard that the Federal Building had been bombed. I assumed it was the one in downtown New York City, but the local affiliate in New York was carrying coverage from Oklahoma City. So I will always mark my trip to Stamford, Connecticut and Group W by the day that the Oklahoma City bombing took place. A look at the complicated world of satellites. I'm Dennis Daly.